CSIS 2470 is filmed before a live studio audience.
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, or evening, or middle of the night, whatever it is. Welcome to class. Like it or not, as web programmers, we have to deal with humans. That's right, the humans. It's our job to anticipate what mistakes they might make, to trap the mistakes, fix them, give them real-time error messaging, all this fun stuff. So in this lecture, we're going to learn how to catch mistakes as they happen and then give the user immediate feedback. So let's dive in to the code. For the moment, I have a web page here with nothing in it. That's all commented out. We'll get to that later. And when I refresh it, we have nothing. And we have an empty JavaScript file right here. So let's just start with something basic, just basic errors in general. For example, let's say we have let x equal 10, and we decide we want to console that out, and we accidentally say console y. So we get an error when I run it. If I refresh, we get this thing here that says reference error, y is not defined. Well, JavaScript looked at our code, saw that y wasn't valid, and it, quote, threw an error. Well, two can play at that game. We can actually throw errors if we want to ourselves, so we're going to learn how to do that. But for now, let's look at catching errors, right? So the way you catch an error that's been thrown is you have to wrap it in what's called a try block. So let's start with try, and we'll put this inside of here. Now, when you try something, you can't just try it. You have to also be willing to catch any errors that were thrown. That's what the try block does. It says, hey, I'm about to try some code here, and it might throw an error, so get ready to catch it. So we have to have a catch if we're going to have a try. There is one exception we'll talk about in a minute. So in our catch block, let's just say console.log caught an error, right? So here's what's going to happen. We're going to refresh the page, and we're going to try this code here. And it's going to look at y and go, hey, I don't know what y is. So I, being JavaScript, am going to throw an error. And because we have line 6, we're going to catch it. Well, what happens when we catch it? Whatever's in the curly braces. So it's just going to say that. So let's refresh it. And look, it caught an error, right? Now, that's not good messaging, but it's just, I wanted to demonstrate that we can actually hijack the JavaScript error trapping system, or their thrown objects, right? We can capture those. But what we really want to do is capture when users make mistakes, right? That's what we're going to play around with here. But in order to do that, there are a few more things we have to look at. Thing number one, when an error is thrown, if you put a parameter on the catch function here, you can actually catch the error object. Right? There's an actual error object that's created. We will be talking about objects more in depth later, but we've already been exposed to them a little bit, right? Everything in the DOM is an object, and that's where we learn about this dot notation, right? Console is an object, and it has the .log. That's a function inside of the console object. So we are somewhat familiar with objects. Again, depth comes later, but for now, know that that is an error object, or an exception object, and I'm just going to console out that error right there. Now, if I refresh, does that look familiar? That's exactly what we saw at the beginning, except we don't have that nice pink background to warn us that something's bad. Well, that's easy to fix because we just say console.error instead of console.log. And now, this is pretty much what we looked at the very beginning before we put all this try-catch business around it. But now we have more control. So for example, the error object has a property called name. I can just print that only instead of the whole object, and it will tell me what the name of the error is, and it's a reference error. It also has a message. And if I look here, y is not defined, that's the message. Well, when I print the whole object, I just see it all, right? But if I only wanted to see the message, there you go. Simple enough. Let's make a little teeny app here now that will take some input from the user. So we'll say let x equal prompt, and it'll say enter a number. And the user will enter a number, and we're going to try to make sure it's actually a number, right? So in our try block, we're going to check to see if it's a number. So let's let num equal parse int x. Parse int is a function that's just built into the language that will take a string and see if it can turn it into an integer. So for example, the string like, quote 5 quote like that, it'll look at that and go, oh, let me treat that as an integer. Because if you don't treat it as an integer, and you try to add 5 plus 5, you end up concatenating 5 and 5, right? But if I convert it to an integer, then I can do 5 plus 5 and it will become 10. So this is what makes it become a number. If I enter a string like Bob or something like that, and I try to parse int, it'll give me an error, an NaN, not a number error. So that's what we're going to be checking for. So let's just start in our try block to let num equal the numberified version of x, if you will. Then we're going to look and see, well, let's just console it first so we can see what's going on. So console num. So if I refresh here and I enter a number, 10, it just consoles out 10. If I refresh it again and I enter Bob, it just enters not a number. So we want to check to see if it's a number or not. Well, there's actually a function for checking that. It's called isNaN. So we're looking for if isNaN num, then we want to throw an error, right? Before JavaScript was throwing the errors. Well, now we're going to throw the error, right? We decided that if this is not the proper data, we want to make up our own error, and we're going to throw new error. There we go. And there's a parameter that we're going to put in there in just a minute. But let's just talk about this. Remember, whole lecture on objects is coming another day. But, and a lot of you are probably familiar with objects because you've probably taken Java, or you may be taking PHP, or you've seen them somewhere else in Python or whatever. So the syntax, though, for creating an object is you call the object's name and you say you want to create a new one, right? And so this is an anonymous object that's not been named. You could say let, for example, I could do something like, let W or Q equal new error, right? I could do that, and then Q is now the object. It's an error object. But in the case of line 6, we're just making it an anonymous one that doesn't have a name, and we're going to throw it. We're just going to throw this whole error, and we're going to send a message. And the message is that X is not a number. Now, the reason I put X there rather than num is because num will be NaN. So I don't want to say NaN is not a number. I want to say Bob is not a number, right? Because X will be equal to Bob or whatever they entered that's not a number. So here's what's going to happen. They're going to enter a number. If it's a number, great, we're fine. If it's not a number, however, then we're going to throw this error, and this is going to catch it, and it's going to console it out saying, hey, Bob is not a number or whatever. So here we go. Refresh. If I type in Bob, and it says error, Bob is not a number. What if I put a real number in? If I put in like 8, well, nothing happens yet because I haven't told it to do anything. So we have this if statement here. This will break out of the try, and it will never run the next line of code if there's an error. So I don't even have to bother with putting an else statement because this is like a return. A throw is like a return, right? So I can just write here, say console.log x or num, either one will be fine, and it'll print the number out. So if I refresh, I do Bob, I get an error. If I refresh and I put a number, it just prints the number out. Okay, well, let's restrict them now. Let's say, hey, enter a number between 1 and 10. So we'll go between 1 and 10. So let's do another check. We tried this block of code. Let's try this next block of code. And that is if num is less than 1 or num is greater than 10, then we're going to throw an error. Throw new error. And we'll say num is not between 1 and 10. Something like that. So let's try that. We refresh it. We enter Bob. We get error. Bob is not a number. We enter 99 and it says 99 is not between 1 and 10. Refresh it and we do 5 and nothing happens because, again, we didn't tell it to do anything. So let's do a final message here. Console.log. Thanks for entering. So let's run that and we'll do 100. 100 is not between 1 and 10. Let's do 10 and thanks for entering 10. So it gives a good message there. And the last one, we'll do Bob and it says Bob is not a number, or we'll do Beavis. Beavis is not a number. So what have we learned so far? We've got 3 new things we've seen here. We've got the try block where we're trying some code. And if the code here gives us problems, we're going to throw some errors, right? Throw. And then if there's some other error that our code doesn't look for, but JavaScript notices it, then it'll also throw that error. Either way, if anywhere in between line 3 and 13, an error is thrown, then it will get caught right here in this variable called e. That will be the error object. And then it will console out the error message. If, however, it makes it past and there's no errors thrown, then that means it will go to the end of the try block and it will write that out. So try, catch, and throw. Those are the 3 new keywords. There's one final one called finally. Now, finally is optional, but when you have it, it always runs no matter what. whether you get an error or not, whether the try block runs all the way through or it skips out and ends up in the catch block, you'll always get the finally to run. So we'll just say console.log, thanks for playing. Okay, so what is going on here? One of these days Jeff will learn how to type. Okay, refresh, and we'll type Beavis. And error, Beavis is not a number, but it also said thanks for playing. Let's refresh it, and let's put an out of bounds number. 100 is not between 1 and 10, thanks for playing. So both times we got the error, we also got the thank you message, but let's put a valid number there. 6 or 5, thanks for entering 5, thanks for playing. So no matter what, whether the try finishes completely and the catch is never run, or the try breaks out and sends something to catch, either way, this will always run. Now the reason you would do that is if you have some resources open, maybe you are having some sort of connection to another server, or you have a file open or something like this. That's a thing you might do if you're using Node.js on a server, which we talk about another time. But this is usually to close resources, just to make sure that you didn't leave anything open. Now you might remember a few minutes ago I mentioned that when you have a try, you have to have a catch. That's not entirely true. If you have a finally, then you don't have to have the catch. So let's run this. We enter Bob. So what happened here? Notice the thanks for playing came before the error message. Also notice that the error message is our error message that we made right here. Bob is not a number. Well, because we threw an error, JavaScript will catch it. But if I didn't have a finally block here, it won't even let me run the code because it's saying, hey, where's your catch or finally? You need one of those two. So I have a finally block, and now I can run it, and I can put a number out of bounds, and it will use our error messaging by default. And so the error is still being caught. We just don't have explicit information on how we want JavaScript to handle it. So JavaScript does its own thing. It will use our messages that we gave though. But we're going to keep the catch block there so we can do our own messaging down here, and we could do other things if we wanted to. Last thing I'm going to show you isn't really anything to do specifically with error trapping, but it's something that's really good to know, and it makes concatenation a lot easier and a lot cleaner. Well, I don't know if cleaner's right, but definitely easier. But it takes a minute just to wrap your head around the exact syntax. So wouldn't it be nice if instead of having to go x plus, I could just say x is not a number? In PHP, you can do that, believe it or not. But you can't do that in JavaScript unless you change a couple of things. So right now, if I were to say x is not a number, watch when I run this and I say Bob, it's just always going to say x is not a number. But if we use, instead of the quotation marks here, we use backticks, which is the one on the tilde key, which is the one to the left of your number 1 on your keyboard. If I use backticks there, and then we're not done yet, then we put the variable in curly braces, and we're not done yet. You put a $sign before all of that. So now I have this $sign curly brace X thing, and this will then look at this and go, oh, we're going to interpret that as a variable rather than just printing out plain old text. So now when I refresh Bob, and it now says Bob is not a number. And if we do the same thing down here, we'll use backticks. So we put a backtick, $sign, curly brace num, backtick, and we refresh it, and we say 100, and it says 100 and not between 1 and 10. Then we got one more place to do that right here. So we'll do $sign, curly brace X, backtick, and a backtick over here. And we will finish with a valid number, and thanks for entering 5. All right, now that we've got a basic understanding here of the try catch finally, let's actually do something practical with it. So I'm going to delete all of this. Actually, I'll save this in a separate file called script2, so that way you can download it in the lecture notes and have access to it if you want. So I'll do that real quick. It'll be called script2. Okay, script2 is now officially a thing. So let's empty out our JavaScript and let's put this form in place right here. Don't worry too much about what's here. We're going to see it live on the web page in just a minute, but I've just got a form that I've made display flex. There's an H3, and then this is a flex item. The H3 is a flex item, and then this is a flex item. These are the buttons, reset and submit, and this is just the field that they're going to fill out. And it's the username field, right? Simple. Let's go back and refresh, and we get this. So what we're going to do is check when they click create to make sure that they entered the right data type, the right format, I should say. So we're going to say that a username can have letters and numbers, and that's all. So let's start off with some basics. We've already set the form up to look for JavaScript. And let's just add a click handler, an event handler to the submit button right there. So let submit equal document dot query selector, and it's a input where type is submit. Next up, submit dot add event listener. We're going to listen for clicks, and we're going to run a thing called validate, and then here we go, function validate input. So it's pretty standard stuff at this point. Hopefully you're feeling okay about this. So what are we looking for here? Well, we're just going to do some regular expression matching, right? And so let's just make the pattern. Remember, in JavaScript, when you do pattern, you put it between two forward slashes. It starts to look like you're doing a comment, but you're actually doing regular expression in between there. So what I'm going to allow is capital A to Z, lowercase a to Z, and 0 through 9. But we also want it to start with that, so it's going to be at the beginning, and there has to be at least one of them, one or more, and then it has to end with that. So that should give us the pattern we're looking for. Don't forget the semicolon there. And if you are fuzzy about that, go look at the previous lecture about regular expression and go to that regex 101 side, play around in there and test that out. All right. Okay, so now let's go ahead and grab the name. So let name equal, or call it username, un equal document get element by ID un. That's username. Let's just start with something simple here. We're going to do console.log, and then if you'll recall, we take the regular expression and there's a function called test, and then we test it against the un.value to see if they match. So I'm going to console that out, and it's going to console true or false. So refresh, submit. It's not, I do that all the time. Oh, there we go. Submit. There we go. Refresh. And if I type Bob and I hit enter, it says true. If I put a number in there, still true. If I put a hyphen in there, however, we get a false. So it looks like it's working. If I have nothing there and I hit enter, it's false. If I have a hyphen by itself, false. If I have a hyphen and number and letters, it's still false, right? It can only be numbers and letters. Okay, so the pattern matching works. Well, this isn't enough, right? We want to do our try-catch stuff and catch the mistake and give them some feedback. Let's start with a try block. So we do try. We're going to do the test there. And if it's not true, then we have an error. We have a problem. So we're going to throw new, and we're going to say only numbers or letters. That's the error we're going to throw when we try it. So let's catch it. And for now, we'll do console.error, and we'll do e.message. So let's start there. Refresh. And if I say Bob, nothing happens. But if I put something that's invalid, only numbers or letters. Well, this is all groovy and everything, but this is not good feedback for the user. So I have already put in place a small tag right here, and you can see it's right below the input. So what we're going to do, rather than putting that message in the console, let's put it right there in the small tag. So I need to grab that, and we're going to do document, we'll call it message document.query selector, and it's going to be the small that's right after the thing that has an ID of UN, right? That is what this is right there. So now we have message, and I can just say message.text content equals that. So that's some good messaging there. Now let's refresh, and we put Bob hyphen, and it says only numbers or letters. Now if we want to, let's get a little bit fancy here, and we'll go message.style.background color equals RGBA, do, I don't know, 175.0.0.5. And so now we'll have a nice little pink background on it. Only numbers and letters. Maybe 200. All right, I don't want to spend an hour changing the color of that. But you get the basic idea there. So that's pretty good. Okay, but this is not where we're going to stop. We're going to actually check that real time as they're typing. Let's hold off on this submit click, and we're going to do a different event, and we're going to attach it to the actual UN. Right? So on the UN, we're not looking for click anymore. We're looking for input. That is a type of event. So now whenever there is input, in other words, some kind of typing is happening in the input field, right? And that's by input field, I mean this one right here, the UN, right? Or excuse me, this one right here, right? The ID is UN. And you'll remember that UN is element by ID UN. And so we now add in a listener that listens for input. And so now that input's going to call the validate rather than the click of the submit button. And so that should already be a good start right there. If I start typing in here, Bob looks fine, but the moment I type a hyphen, only numbers please. Now if I back up, we want it to fix it and say that it is valid, because I don't want to have a mistake and then I fix the mistake and it doesn't tell me that I fixed the mistake. That's bad user messaging, right? One of the things we have to keep reminding ourselves of is a big part of JavaScript's purpose is to improve the user's experience, right? The metaphor I always use, HTML is like the framing and the structure of a house. Then CSS, that's the sheetrock, the paint, the window dressing, the curtains, all that stuff, the pictures on the wall, all that fun stuff. But none of that's that exciting if you don't have your JavaScript in your house. And what's that? That's the plumbing, the electricity, right? The air conditioner, the heating, all the interactive things that make it a better experience. Yeah, sure, it looks nice to have this beautiful house, but what's the point when you can't see it because there's no light switch and you can't have running water and all this stuff, right? That's where the JavaScript comes in. So we're using that to make it interactive. Well, let's go in here, and if there was a problem with the pattern, we're going to say only numbers and letters here, and we're going to make this message here. But if it worked, we're going to do almost the same thing here. So remember, line 13, if there was an error, it's going to escape, or not escape, but return out of the try. So line 15 will never get run in that event. But if it makes it past that if statement, then line 15 will get run. Now we don't want to set the text context to message, obviously. We want to say something like valid data. Good job. And then let's just change the background color to green. And let's see how that looks. So now when I refresh, right now I haven't typed anything, so nothing's happened. But when I type a B for Bob, valid data, B-O, then I type a hyphen and it's only numbers and letters. But if I back up, it goes back to valid. So I can toggle back and forth depending on what I'm typing. If I type something wrong, it'll correct me. And if I go back and leave it blank, it now will say only numbers and letters, even though there's nothing there. That's because I started typing something and I've erased it, and it's now looking for a pattern that starts with some number or letter, and it's not finding it. Okay, so this is all great, but the last thing we want to do right now, even though I don't have valid data, I can still click the create button. Well, we don't want that. So we're going to disable the create button, and we've done this before. Disable, disabled, there we go. And then I refresh, and so now it's gone, and I have a little not allowed symbol there on my cursor. For those who are curious, that's just right here. If I hover over the input that's disabled, then it will set the cursor to not allowed. Otherwise, it'll be a finger pointer over here, right there. Okay, that's all that is. So all we want to do now, if we put a valid pattern, we just want to enable that. So let's get our hands on the button. Well, we've already done it. The button's right there, right? So submit. So we can just say right here, submit, there I did it again, submit disabled equals false. Now if I refresh it, it's disabled, but if I start typing Bob, it's now enabled. The problem is if I type a hyphen, it doesn't disable again, and it should. So that's easy enough. Every time we have an error, submit disable equals true. So now you can watch it toggle back and forth here. So I type Bob, it works great. I put a hyphen, it disables it. But I delete the hyphen, it re-enables it. So as long as I have valid data in there, then I'm good. And the moment I don't, it gives me the red warning and it blocks out the create button. So lastly, now let's make it when I click the create button, something happens. So we'll turn this event handler back on, but we'll change it to process data. And we're going to throw in a few new things that you haven't seen before, along with some basic processing things that you have seen before. But first, let's just take one last look here. We didn't use a finally block because we don't need to with what we're doing here. But we have a function that runs every time there's any activity on that input field. And we have a pattern that we're looking for, regular expression, where we compare the user input. We try to compare the user input. And if there's a problem, we throw an error and we'll catch it down here. If we caught it, we do this, which is disable the submit button, change the background to pink, and we put the error message there. But the next time the user types something, we'll try that again. And if it happens to make it past here, then it will run this code and it'll say, hey, that's valid. Change it to green and it will enable the button. And it'll just keep doing this over and over again until we click submit or we stop typing. So now we are going to see what happens when we click submit. Function, process data. What do we want to do here? Well, I'm just going to yank the form off the page. We're not going to actually do any processing, because remember, typically what you do, you use JavaScript to do sort of preliminary validation, and we're doing some pretty good stuff here to give the user some good feedback. And then once it's all done, what would really happen is when they clicked submit, we would process it through PHP or something like that. But we're not going to mess with that. We're just going to make the form disappear here. And so let's grab it so we have access to it. Let form equal document dot query selector. And down here, dot remove child. This is a new one. I could just set display none, but I want to completely remove it from the DOM just for purposes of showing you that this is a thing you can do, right? So remove child. So let's refresh and see what happens. We're going to get a weird little error, which we'll talk about in a minute. If I refresh it, I type in Bob and I click create. Oh, before we refresh it, we need to make sure we actually use the right function. It is not remove child, it's just remove. I do that all the time. All right, so now let's refresh, type in Bob, hit enter. And now we get this error over here, form submission canceled because the form is not connected. That's because it's gone, right? The body's empty. There's nothing in the body anymore, right? So we want to prevent the default behavior from happening. Well, there's a function called prevent default. It's part of the event. Remember, this is a function being called from an event listener, right? So process data. So that means there is an event there. So if I just go in here and I say event or E, prevent default, this is a function or a method that will prevent the default behavior of that event, which in this case would be doing something with the form, right? So refresh it now, type in a valid thing and hit enter. And now the form vanishes and we don't get any kind of error message. So last we want to put in the body a message. So in the past, what we've done is taken the body and then we've said, set its inner HTML to something, right? Well, you can do that, but sometimes you might have multiple items there in the body already and you don't want to overwrite them. You want to just append to the end of it. So we're going to actually do some appending. So here's how this goes. First of all, we need to create an element, right? And so let's go let p equal document dot create element, and we want to create a p as in a paragraph tag, or we can create an h1 as in an h1 tag. Let's do an h1 and we'll call it h. Now we want to take h and do what we've done before, which is set its text content equal to processed. Okay, so all we've done is create a paragraph, or excuse me, we created an h1 with form processed inside of the h1. Now what we're going to do is append that to the body, right? So there's a couple ways to do it. I could come up here and do the typical thing, right? Query selector body, or believe it or not, you can just target it directly. Document body append child h. I want to append that h with all that content in it, right? So let's run that. Make sure I didn't typo anything because you never know. Refresh. Hello. Form processed, right? That's the little h1 there. And if we look in the DOM over here, there's now an h1 inside the body. Now, as I mentioned, this document.body here, we could have done what we've done before just to clear anything up here. Body equal document dot query selector body, right? And then down here we would just call body or whatever we call this, B and B, right? So I just want to let you know this is the same thing that we've done in the past, but we can save a step by not having to bother doing that and just calling it directly document.body. So document body, and then we append child. So we append h to that. And that's it. Now remember what we've looked at before. Let's clear this out and let's clear that out. Let's go back to this method here. Let b equal document.get, query selector body, right? And then we've done this where I've said b.inner HTML is equal to h1 processed, right? This is how we've been doing it up until now. Refresh, enter something, and now it says form processed, and it still is the same end result. However, what if we had something like h1 welcome to our site? So we have something like this, welcome to our site. Well, now we have a problem. When I put Bob here, when I click create, that h1 went away, right? We just have the form processed. Well, I still want the welcome to our site message there theoretically, right? And so that's why doing it this way doesn't quite work. This is when I want to replace the entire HTML in between the body or whatever tag we're dealing with. That's why this method is superior for situations like this. So ignore line 15 and line 5. and we're saying let H equal this H1, and then we have H text context or content is form processed, then we're going to append to the body, right? So we're going to add something to it. So now when I refresh, we enter something, hit it. It still says welcome to our site, but it also says form processed. As you can see there, it appended the H1 to the body's content rather than overriding the entire content. All right, folks, that's it. Hopefully you got a pretty decent feel now for try, catch, the occasional finally, and throwing errors, and how those all work together. And then on top of that, also, we got a good look at how to do real-time validation. Like as the user's typing, we give them messaging. And hopefully the other thing we're learning here is that we want the user messaging to be clear, to be in their face where they can see it. And there are things we can do to animate it and make it even more noticeable and this type of thing. But for now, I just want to give you the basic idea. So that's everything. Thanks for coming to class. And as always, if you can answer those questions on your screen there, then you're ready for the quiz. And more importantly, you've learned what you needed to know from this video. We'll see you in the next one, folks.